next CNN in Fortune. They've got the intellect, the computer skills, and the savvy to make companies change the way they do business.
It's an exchange. We have something to offer. You can't hide from us anymore.
The power of the digital generation. And
my favorite design, trust me.
what's hot? Designer gear with a hip-hop flair makes retailers sit up and take notice. Locking in on FUBU. CNN in Fortune, Sunday on CNN.
NATO should stop bombing Yugoslavia, at least for a while, to show a goodwill. Otherwise, we should expect a very unpredictable reaction from the Russia. And history has a clear message for us. Never underestimate Russia. Never.
This is CNN.
Contact and capture.
I'm Fanula Sweeney in London. Here's a quick look at the top stories. NATO is taken by surprise by the sudden arrival of Russian troops in Yugoslavia. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stroke Talbot was told to turn his Brussels-bound plane around and head back to Moscow to resolve matters. British troops were also ordered to prepare for a rapid entry into Kosovo to repel the Russians. Russia later gave assurances it would not enter Kosovo alone. Negotiations over the command structure of the International Peace Force are still being finalized. British and French troops will spearhead the peacekeeping mission in Kosovo, entering the province on Saturday. Refugees cheered them as they arrived in a border area. They're now camped along the border between Kosovo and Macedonia. The U.S. Secretary of State also received a hero's welcome as she delivered a message of hope to thousands of Kosovo refugees. She warned them to expect to discover some disturbing sights upon returning home. In other news, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Sartaj Aziz has left Beijing after talks with Chinese officials on the Kashmir conflict. During his visit, Aziz met with the #2 leader in the Communist Party, Li Peng. Aziz briefed Beijing about the conflict between Islamabad and New Delhi over Kashmir ahead of his visit to India on Saturday. 30 children were taken to hospital in Belgium after drinking Coca-Cola. The soft drink manufacturers later recalled 2.5 million bottles of the beverage for testing. They said they found no contamination in the drinks, but acknowledged that it did not meet usual standards of quality and had an unusual taste. The children from Bornem in northern Belgium have been released from hospital. It follows a food scare in Belgium where meat and milk were recalled after a cancer-causing dioxin was found in animal feed. And that is an update of the headlines this hour. Now for viewers in Latin America, here's Time 100, People of the Century, Heroes and Icons. And elsewhere, it's time for a closer look at the main stories in World News Europe. Moscow's decision to move troops into Yugoslavia caught the international community by surprise. CNN's Walter Rogers has details on the Russian deployment.
These are Russian troops that had been stationed in Bosnia, now under orders to transfer to their newest posting in the Balkans, Kosovo. There are 15 light armored vehicles leading 25 trucks carrying Russian troops and equipment. A K4 designation appeared to have been hastily painted on the vehicles, the Kosovo designation, this replacing the S4 designation they had as peacekeepers in Bosnia. The Russian convoy was first spotted about mid-morning, moving out of Bosnia toward Belgrade. Just before 1 in the afternoon, the same battalion was seen crossing the Sava River into downtown Belgrade, then turning south toward the Kosovo border. The Yugoslav government clearly welcomes these Russian troops. They see them as defenders of Serb interests in Kosovo. Serbs and Russians share similar religious and ethnic roots and have been traditional allies. Yugoslav President Slobodan Milosevic has repeatedly assured anxious Serbs in Kosovo that 10,000 Russian troops would soon be stationed there, this to look after the Serb minority. Walter Rogers, CNN, Belgrade.
U.S. President Bill Clinton has offered thanks and praise to the American military while visiting the home base of the U.S. B-2 bombers in the state of Missouri. The base claims the sophisticated stealth planes were responsible for 20% of all targets hit in Yugoslavia. President Clinton emphasized that the racial and ethnic diversity of the U.S. military sent an equally powerful message to Belgrade as the airstrikes.
You helped to put the lie to Mr. Milosevic's campaign of ethnic cleansing and killing in two ways, not one. First, and most obviously, you did it with the power of the bombing campaign. But second, you did it with the power of your example.
Mr. Clinton also spoke of the challenges ahead, including returning the refugees to Kosovo and helping them rebuild their homes and businesses. On a one-day visit to Macedonia, U.S. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright has been hearing firsthand about the suffering of Kosovo refugees. Albright received an enthusiastic welcome as she walked through the Stenkovic refugee camp, home to more than 20,000 Kosovo Albanian refugees. She was greeted with chants and embraces by the crowds and listened intently as many recounted their ordeals. After a meeting with the Macedonian president, she told a news conference she is confident the refugees will return soon, albeit with some trepidation.
I don't want anybody to think that any of us think that it's easy to go back and live side by side with people some of whose ethnic group was responsible for doing dreadful things to them. On the other hand, I think that we all believe in multi-ethnic societies. President Grigorov is running one here, and while we have to make sure that we understand that there is some legitimate anger, and if we did not understand that, we would be naive and we would be letting ourselves in for additional problems and disappointments. But I believe that with the right help, that over time this is going to be possible, and that the people really want to go back and rebuild their lives.
Earlier on Friday, Albright visited U.S. soldiers at Camp Able Sanctuary in Macedonia. She praised their mission so far, saying, quote, Milosevic and the Serbs have lost control over Kosovo, but she also warned them to brace themselves for grim discoveries as they enter Kosovo. Well, as we reported earlier on CNN, NATO is on standby to enter Kosovo after an order to deploy was replaced with an order to stand down. We're joined by CNN's Tom Mintier now in the border town of Blatce, which is, of course, a major staging area for the peacekeepers. Tom.
Vanilla, things may be changing as I speak. We just saw approaching the border more than a dozen British armored personnel carriers and jeeps, and it appears that the staging area is being moved closer to the border. As I look back here now, you can see the armored personnel carriers that are stacked up here at the Blatce border crossing. They have pulled up here without any advance notice. They are packed with equipment stacked about 10 to 12 feet high on top of the APC, and they are right now at the border crossing. Also in the air as they pulled up, we could hear helicopters overhead, something we have not heard here at all. About 40 minutes ago, we also heard gunfire coming from the Yugoslav side of the border about 500 meters from here. But I can tell you that something is definitely up right now, because these APCs, armored personnel carriers, have moved up to the border crossing. It may simply be staging for what they're going to do at first light, but they came roaring out of the darkness and into the border crossing area about 5 minutes ago. So it is quite possible that they are staging for a movement in first light, or they may even go in the darkness. Nobody is really quite sure right now. What we do know is that earlier in the day we saw British Challenger tanks being moved to forward positions. These tanks were being moved from staging areas back away from the border. They came through Skopje and then moved into the Blace area. They are probably less than a mile from the border where they are being staged for deployment into Kosovo. As these vehicles moved past a couple of refugee camps, they were greeted by tens of thousands of refugees who came out from behind the wire and approached the road and were yelling and cheering NATO on, cheering the KLA. Basically, it could not be contained by Macedonian police. These camps are locked down. These people are not allowed out, whether it's at day or night. But they came out, broke down the fences, came out into the road. They don't have champagne, but they had bottles of soft drink, and they were shaking them and spraying them over the NATO vehicles as they went by. So apparently something may be up tonight before Saturday actually comes. It's about 2 hours away here in Macedonia. But we have seen armored personnel carriers approach the border directly. They are on the Macedonian side still, but with the order, if it is given, they could be crossing over the border in less than 5 minutes. That's all it would take them to cross. If the order is given for them to move forward tonight, they would be in Yugoslavia, in Kosovo, within 5 minutes after starting their engines. It's that close. It's basically about 800 or 900 meters from the Macedonian border to the Yugoslav side, and if the order is given, they could be over there in no time flat. Fanula?
CNN's Tom Interior in Macedonia, and he'll keep us up to date, of course, with events there as they proceed during the evening. Well, for more now on the reaction from the provincial capital, Pristina, CNN's Jim Clancy joins us on the phone. Jim.
The people of Pristina, the Serbs of Pristina at least, haven't had much to celebrate for more than 3 months with this conflict coming to a head, but tonight they're out in the streets in force. Thousands upon thousands of them have gathered in the streets after hearing the news that Russian peacekeepers were on the way. These people clearly intend to give a greeting to those Russian peacekeepers should they come into Pristina tonight. They're out with Russian and Serb flags. They've been burning American flags, firing AK-47s in the air and setting off fireworks. The crowd is in a very good mood. I haven't seen the spirits this high in Pristina ever since we arrived several days ago. It all goes to the security situation for Serbs. There were reports today that some elements of the Kosovo Liberation Army burned Serb homes and forced them out at Orahovac. That was met with a lot of fear and trepidation in this city, but now with word that the Russians are going to be taking part in the peacekeeping force here, the people are jubilant. They're out in the street, as I said, by the thousands. And there you heard another gun going off, Vanilla. That's the scene here in Pristina.
All right, thanks very much, CNN's Jim Clancy. Well, still to come here on CNN, stocks on Wall Street end the day sharply lower. We'll have the details, plus also our sports news update later in the program. But first, protests at the slow rate of electoral counting in Indonesia. That after this short break.
I wear the same outfit every day, can eat 4 times my body weight, and I speak perfect Scooby-Doo. But I can't be seen just anywhere. That's why I'm on Cartoon Network. Cartoon Network gives me access to the coolest cartoons in the world, and you can't beat that. Cartoon was Raggy. Cartoon Network. Don't stay home without it.
Welcome back. Tensions between India and Pakistan remain high on the eve of talks over Kashmir. Heavy fighting continued in the disputed region, and India continued to express outrage after the bodies of 6 of its soldiers were returned from Kashmir bearing evidence of torture. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Sartaj Aziz returned from Beijing saying China supports a negotiated settlement to the Kashmir crisis. CNN's New Delhi Bureau Chief Satinder Bindra has more.
India is accusing Pakistan of torturing 6 Indian soldiers and then shooting them in cold blood. Senior Indian officials and hundreds of others were present as the army honored its dead.
What we have witnessed is not simply a breach of established norms or a violation of international agreements. It is a civilizational crime against all humanity. I feel as if I've been personally violated.
India conducted autopsies on all the 6 bodies.
The entire nation has been outraged.
Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh says the eyes of some of the Indian soldiers were gouged out and their skulls crushed before they were shot. Pakistan has denied the 6 Indian soldiers were tortured. This Indian analyst says Pakistan has flouted all accepted norms of warfare.
I cannot think of a single convention relating to war crimes that has not been violated.
India also played reporters audio tapes of what it calls phone conversations between Pakistan's army chief and his deputy. India says the recordings are proof of Pakistan's direct involvement in the infiltration into the Indian side of Kashmir. For 5 weeks, India has been trying to push out or kill intruders on its side of Kashmir. Pakistan has consistently denied it supports any infiltrators. Even so, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Sartaj Aziz is scheduled to arrive for talks in New Delhi Saturday. India says it wants to talk about what it calls a complete Pakistani withdrawal from its territory. India's Foreign Minister says he'll also demand Pakistan account for what he's described as a barbaric act against Indian soldiers in uniform. Satinder Bindra, CNN, New Delhi.
4 days have passed since Indonesians went to the polls, yet only a fraction of the votes have been counted. On Friday, more than 100 students stood outside the hotel where votes are being tallied to protest the slow process. Many Indonesians say they fear the delays may indicate vote tampering. CNN Jakarta Bureau Chief Maria Ressa reports.
The Election Commission is plodding ahead with 2 parallel counts. The official one based on results from 320,000 polling stations, the other faster but unofficial count based on statistical sampling from about 4,000 sub-district offices. The frontrunner in both is the PDIP, led by opposition leader Megawati Sukarnoputri. For the past 3 days, the PKB, led by Muslim leader Abdurrahman Wahid, was in second place in both, but by Thursday, the ruling party Golkar had overtaken it. That's not unexpected because of Golkar's massive resources and political machine. But when Golkar announced Tuesday its party count showed it in second place, opposition parties cried foul play.
We have this burden of being authoritarian and rather unilateral in our action of the past, which in part was necessary, I think, because we were obsessed with unity and cohesion. Now we are more obsessed with openness and democracy.
Still, analysts warn of social unrest if Golkar were to win more than 30% of the votes. People don't want them, says the student. How can they win again unless they cheated?
If you see that the procedures that are in effect, it's impossible for someone to rig votes.
Part of the problem? High expectations set by the Election Commission, which earlier claimed it would have preliminary results by Tuesday. Now, public service ads are explaining the delay, asking Indonesians to be patient.
For now, patience seems to be winning out, with most of the major parties cautioning their supporters against reacting prematurely. Still, international observers are pushing for faster results, which are now expected in about 6 days. Maria Ressa, CNN, Jakarta.
Well, coming up, a look at news from the world of sport, plus all the latest business and financial headlines, including a look at the world markets as the Dow Jones drops 200 points. Stay with us.
5 months, potentially the entire Belgian population has been poisoned on a daily basis, with levels of dioxin in chicken reaching 1,500 times the permitted amount. The authorities, aware of the catastrophe, did nothing to alert the public. In fact, it only came out when a document was leaked to the press. In a country paralyzed by corruption and incompetence, only the measures imposed by neighboring countries can save the Belgian people from their own government.
Welcome back. The Coca-Cola company says it has found no contamination in a batch of Coke in Belgium. 30 children in the community of Bornem were taken to hospital after drinking the soda on Tuesday. Coca-Cola recalled 2.5 million bottles of the beverage. The company said tests showed no contamination in the drinks, but acknowledged that there had been what some called an off taste. All the recalled sodas were bottled in Antwerp. The children have been released from hospital. Now, time to join Lauren Terry at our CNN Financial News Desk in New York with this Moneyline News Hour Extra. Lauren.
Hello to you, Finola. Stocks slipped deep into the red to end a volatile trading week. Nagging concerns about interest rates also set long-term interest rates levels not seen in more than a year and a half. Stocks and bonds took a hit on a rumor about an emergency meeting of the U.S. Federal Reserve, but the Fed would not comment. Checking Wall Street's closing numbers for you, the Dow Industrials fell 130 points to 10,490, and for the week it plunged 309 points. Meanwhile, the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite lost 36 points. Since Friday, that index has shed 1.2%. And a nearly 1-point drop in price in the 30-year Treasury has pushed the yield all the way up to 6.13%. After the market closed, European regulators recommended the suspension of Pfizer's antibiotic Trovan. Earlier this week, U.S. officials linked the drug to liver failure. And in other corporate news, another merger in the oil industry comes under scrutiny. The European Union is launching a probe into BP Amoco's $27 billion purchase of its U.S. rival, Atlantic Richfield. That's just one day after the EU unveils an investigation into the $87 billion deal between Exxon and Mobil. European authorities are concerned both deals would create too few players in the oil and gasoline market. The board of Norway's Saga Petroleum reluctantly recommended shareholders to accept a takeover by rivals Norsk Hydro and Statoil. A near $4.8 billion bid from those two firms topped an offer from French oil giant Elf Aquitaine. And in the aerospace industry, Spanish holding company CEPE reaches an agreement with Germany's Daimler Chrysler. They'll create a joint venture between their respective aerospace groups. Daimler Chrysler beat out offers from other companies in Italy, France, and in Britain. The deal will create Europe's leading aerospace company. A new computer virus is infecting tens of thousands of computers via email. The new worm.explore.zip bug can delete files altogether. The email message says, quote, "I received your email and I shall send you a reply ASAP. Till then, take a look at the attached zip docs," end quote. Computer experts advise that you delete it without opening it. And that is the latest in financial news. I'm Lauren Terry in New York. World News will continue after this short break.
But you can be sure that the summer art scene in London is red hot. Fast and fearless, Still Aguada are taking London by storm. Bursting with energy and drive, this maverick troupe is making headlines and thrilling the crowds. Also in this week's Art Club, one of England's primary sculptors, Richard Deacon, takes us on a tour of his studio and explains his preoccupation with space and form.
The height is very specific, and the gap between the bars is enough to establish the form, but not enough to prevent you passing through it.
And also, who says it's a man's world out there? We take a tour of 3 hip London galleries, all run by women.
This piece here is a hand-type portrait of the mythological Steve McQueen by David Adkins.
So check out the Art Club in London tonight on CNN.
Time now for a look at the day in sports. Here's CNN's Tom Steiner.
For just the second time in World Cup cricket history, a bowler snared the hat trick as Pakistan's win eliminated neighbors India. The Pakistanis easily beat Zimbabwe by 148 runs to reach the semifinals. Saklan Mushtaq ripped through the tail end of India's order. The 22-year-old off-spinner dismissed 3 batsmen with consecutive balls to make history and get Pakistan back on course. Pakistan moved level with South Africa on 6 points at the top of the Super 6 standings. A straight-set victory over Goran Ivanisevic today at Queen's Club assured Pete Sampras will head to Wimbledon #1 and equal Ivan Lendl's record of 270 weeks at the top. A good showing later this month at the All England Club would allow Sampras to be ranked #1 on July the 5th. Now that would put him past Lendl with a record 271 weeks at the top of the computer rankings. Sampras next gets Aussie Leighton Hewitt. Sargisian ended Greg Grusetsky's hopes and will face another Briton on Saturday after Tim Henman survived a 3-setter against Karol Kuchera. European golf, they are at the halfway stage of the German Open. Sweden's Jarmo Sandelin fired a 64 to move to 11 under. Sandelin is aiming to become a Ryder Cup member for the first time. Victory on Sunday would lift him from 5th to 3rd in Europe's Ryder Cup table, and that would virtually assure his place for the team that will battle the USA in September. To France, where slumping Laura Davis stands on the brink of her first title of the year. The veteran Englishwoman shot a 68, now 7 under after 3 rounds. That puts her 2 shots in front of Sweden's Katrina Nilsmark. The 36-year-old Davis is shooting for her 55th career victory. And that is the latest look at world sport. I'm Tom Steiner.
Pope John Paul II, who helped inspire a democratic revolution in Poland, is making history there again. Midway through a 13-day tour of his homeland, he addressed Poland's parliament. A cross-section of Polish dignitaries was on hand for the speech, the first ever by a pontiff. Later, the Pope visited what was known during World War II as the Warsaw Ghetto. He paid tribute to the thousands of Jews who were deported from there to concentration camps. And I'm Fionnuala Sweeney in London. Insight is next on CNN. Please stay with us.
Chcemy również, regulując